Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 32nd episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week, my guest co-host is a true crime lover from Arkansas and the host of her own true crime podcast, too. My guest co-host this week is Danica Yates. Hello, Danica.
Hello, Liam. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about today's episode.
Oh, I am so excited. We've been talking, Danica, it feels like we've been talking for so long about this case, and so I'm so excited to finally be able to break it down for us. Danica is the host of Murder and Mimosas, the true crime podcast that she hosts with her mom, Shannon. They drop episodes every single Saturday. So I need to know, because mom-daughter duo kind of deal, I need to know how this came about. You know, I'm assuming that you're the one who kind of provoked this idea, but I need to know, like, the beginning to end, how did all this happen?
So I actually originally started a true crime book club here in Little Rock, and we meet for brunch once a month.
Oh, fun.
So that's where Mimosas came in. And she was in it with me. So we decided that, you know, outside of just reading, where there's still all these other true crime cases that we're interested in and we want to learn about and what we were about. So we decided, well, let's go ahead and just bring our true crime and our mimosas together again. And we'll do it in podcast form.
Well, there you go. Awesome. I love that. And a good little mother-daughter bonding time, too, I'm sure, huh?
Yes, it is. And we made it where our episodes drop about brunch time every Saturday. So, you know, the listeners can also have a mimosa.
Oh, well, there you go. I love a good mimosa. So, like, I'm all aboard that for sure. So, speaking of, like champagne, like wine, kind of like, let's just like make that like a little transition over. So this week we are drinking Toasted Heads Chardonnay. It has a unique richness and complexity, complemented by peaches and pineapple, and finishes with notes of toasted coconut and butterscotch. So all different kinds of flavors that I've never even heard of in a wine before. And so this, like, and the label is totally different too. It's like a bear, like, breathing fire. And so I was like, you know what, let's just go for it. Like, I'm, all about stretching our horizons on this podcast. And so I'm ready for it.
Finding this one in the store was really easy because there's not many with bears, and there's none with bears breathing fire except
I'm sure. I'm sure you went right up to the front, to the guy at the front, was just like, hey, like, do you have a wine with a bear breathing fire? And he was like, say no more. I got you. So I do need to know, Danica, what kind of wine do you typically go for?
I like ones that are a little sweeter.
Okay.
But I'm not super picky. I'm always willing to try something new. So I don't have like one go-to. It's like all about my mood, So
okay, cool. Well, I think then you would love that sound. I think then you would probably like this one up, I'm gonna guess. Because if you like sweeter wines.
Yeah, I think so. It almost sounds like tropical. You got pineapples and coconut.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and I love trying new kinds of wines, especially like I love pineapples. Like that's my new like summer thing. Like I'm trying to like eat more fruits and stuff, and so pineapples are definitely on my list. And so maybe I'll just like I didn't have my pineapples yet today, so maybe I'll just like drink my pineapples instead. Like who cares, right? So
same thing, really.
Basically, yeah, right, exactly. You know what? Like what is wine made out of? Grapes, and so therefore this is a fruit smoothie, and that's a whole I'll die on. Cheers to you, Danica. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, it smells so good.
It does smell really good. Very light flavors.
Yeah, it's nothing like really comes out super strong to me. Like,
I definitely taste the pineapple, but like not super strong, like you said. Yeah, this is not what I was expecting at all, but I kind of like it.
It's really good.
Yeah, toasted coconuts. I definitely get some toasted coconuts in the back. I get why the bear is breathing fire, because I do kind of feel like a little tingliness, a little toast going on in the back of my mouth. So I'm liking this one. I really I don't typically go for Chardonnays because I'm not an oaky person. I'm not like a buttery person for wines. It's not my deal, but I am kind of into this one.
I know it's still got the buttery to it, but it's not like nothing in it is like overpowering anything else.
No, not at all. I definitely, like I said, I definitely get coconut. I definitely get pineapple. I'm struggling to taste the peaches. I do get a little, I get buttery. I don't really get butterscotch necessarily. Yeah.
I think of butterscotch almost being really, really sweet, and I don't get a whole lot of that. It smells more like peaches.
Yeah, you know what? You're right about that. You get a peach a lot more if you sniff it. That's so true. Yeah, I'm into this one. And listen, all of my Like I'm trying to expand my horizons on this podcast. I'm trying to try new things, try new wines. And so this is not something that I would typically have gone for in the store, right? Like I like, more of an elegant bottle. Like I like a darker red. So this is not something I would have gone for. And so that's why I was like, you know what, let's just like go for it. Like, let's just like do it. And so this is your sign if you guys are trying to, try something new, maybe start with your wine first and just like see, the worst thing that can happen is you take a little sip and then you pass it along to somebody else who would actually like it, right? Like
Exactly.
what are you harming? So there you go. This is your sign. Try something new because Liam tried something new and Liam liked it. So
Yes, and Erica liked it, and I would not have. I had been like in the store picking it out on my own. I would have saw Bear
mm,
like, breathing fire, and I'm like, I don't think that's the one for me. And
mm,
yeah, fine.
yeah, that's not my vibe today. Yeah, for sure. No, we're on the same
Like
page. We're definitely on the same page.
so good.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. Yeah. So there you go. So, Danica, like we were talking about, so we have been dissecting this case for a very, very, very long time. I know every single one of our true crime, like our hardcore, like diehard true crime lovers on both of our podcasts are going to know this case, like front to start. But hopefully we'll bring something a little bit new, right? But for those of you who are, casual, true crime listeners and are, don't recognize this case, hold on because it is absolutely bumpy from beginning to end. So what do you say we dive deep into this one, Danica?
I'm ready to go.
Let's go. So, Danica, this week I am taking you north of the border for the very first time on this podcast. I am going to tell you about a disturbing investigation that involved dozens of some of Vancouver's most vulnerable women going missing from the city over the time span of nearly 20 years. This week, I am going to tell you the stories of Cara, Ellis, and Andrea Borhaven and the rest of Vancouver's missing women. Lori Ann Ellis and the rest of her family were all used to hearing from 26-year-old Cara, Lori Ann's sister-in-law, on big occasions. She would call back on birthdays or holidays or talk about big news in the family. That was pretty much the extent of Cara's communication back home since she moved to Vancouver and really got involved with the wrong crowd. Cara had gotten involved in drugs and turned to sex work to support that habit. So suddenly, the calls home about the big days also included calls requesting help when she was arrested, which most of the family was always happy to provide, but maybe just through some gritted teeth. But in early 1997, that regular communication suddenly stopped, and it seemed as though, from what I'm gathering from her family, the ending of communication wasn't all that uncommon. She was a little more wishy-washy than they would have liked. She would get arrested or get wrapped up with the wrong person, or maybe get upset with her family's disdain over her lifestyle and distance herself for a while until she ended up coming back around. But this time was different. Cara's cutoff of communication lasted a month, and then 2 months, and then 6 months, and then it was more than a year since anyone had heard from Cara.
Oh wow, I can't imagine being a family member, like her family members, and all of a sudden she stops talking, and you kind of expect her to come back, and
Yeah.
I just get a pit in my
Yeah.
stomach thinking about it.
Yeah, and and again, like this is like the first little like taste of like kind of like the themes, right, that we're going to be talking about throughout this episode. Because the problem, right, among the people in this community is that they it's very transient, right? Maybe you're wrapped up with this person, and you're happy, you're okay for like for a while, and everything's okay. You don't really need to reach out to family for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden you do, right? So it's not hearing from someone from that from that community for a prolonged period of time is normal. Whereas like, you or I, right, I would imagine, I call my mom like basically every other day. And so, her not hearing from me for a week is cause for concern. But like, not hearing from Cara for a month, 2 months, 6 months, maybe a little bit more normal.
Right.
So that causes problems here.
Yeah, and this is also for social media too, because I was thinking my grandmother texted me the other day and was like, "Are
So
you
true.
okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And she goes, "Haven't seen you post anything on Facebook lately. Just checking." And I was like, "Okay."
If you ever go missing, your grandma's gonna come in handy, huh? So there you go. She's got your eye. She's got her eye on you. Well, the family had gotten really concerned and worried that something really bad had happened to Cara. Her sister-in-law, Lori Ann, decided that she was going to spend one of her long holiday weekends in Vancouver for the summer of 1998, searching the streets of Vancouver, looking for Cara and trying to find out what had happened to her, to give the rest of her family some closure or at least some direction. After she has no luck, she decides that she is going to get police involved. She reports Cara missing in August of 1998.
Oh, and this is what, a year after basically they had stopped hearing from her. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that is, and yeah. So she again, just to recap, like anyone, people last reported hearing from her in January of 1997, and then August of 1998. So it's a year and 7 months, before someone finally filed a report. But again, going back to so before she even files the report, she's going down there and looking for her herself. And so again, I think the initial instinct isn't necessarily, oh, she's missing, let's get police involved, whatever, because again, if someone in my circle, steps out of their routine, I'm calling the cops. But this is, it's stepping into a different world that I'm sure a lot of us are not familiar with at all.
Yeah. And I'm thinking her family being familiar with her drug use, I doubt that she is super aware of it's been X amount of days if she's gone on Twitter, so I'm sure for them,
right.
She probably doesn't even think it's been that long or isn't aware that it's been as long as it has been. So I'm sure families are a little freaking out, but just assuming or at least hoping that they'll go out and she'll be on the street and they'll find her and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and too, I because what you said struck something in me too, of the people that Cara, I'm sure, is hanging out with, I'm sure are not communicating back with the family, and so I say January 1997, that's the last time that anyone said yes, this is when we heard from Cara, but maybe there was somebody who just never stepped up and said anything, or was maybe didn't even know that they were talking to Cara, maybe they thought they were talking to somebody else, because a lot of these women use, totally different names, when they're participating in sex work. And so it's just complicated, right? Again, we say all this, we sum it all up just to say it's just a very complicated situation that we're talking about here.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't immediately see that police are taking her report very seriously. I mean, we are talking about a sex worker, possibly a drug addict. Lori Ann can just tell that her sister-in-law is not going to be high on their missing persons priority list. Police even say that it was likely that Cara went on some kind of vacation, despite making a fixed income on welfare of just $100 a month, which again, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. This kind of person is not spending money on vacation, but whatever.
Right. And you would think if she's going on vacation, she's telling someone it's been a year and 7 months. Where did she go on vacation for a year and 7 months for $100 a month? Because I would like to go for $100.
Yeah, true. Me too. Hey, we'll split that cost. How about that, Danica? Because I'll be there in a second. But yeah, I mean, but again, I think that just goes to I feel like I get these I read about this all the time in these kind of cases where it's somebody reports, for example, the Tammy Zawicki case, we did episode 16 of this podcast. That was and the rush to judgment there was that, oh, Tammy must have went off with a boyfriend when she didn't even have a freaking boyfriend, right? And so I never understand why they offer these kinds of assumptions. Stop assuming things, just go look into it. It's not your job to assume things. You don't know this person, they know her way more than you do. Just go investigate it.
Yes, and the fact that it still happens today, especially with those sex workers or maybe drug addicts, that they're just kind of well, it's really not that big a deal. The fact that it's still happening is what's so frustrating. They haven't learned.
Yeah, and too, it just to be fair to them, right? I'm sure that these kinds of situations happen all the time, right? This is a very, again, not to stigmatize at all, but this is a very unreliable community, right? Because of what we were talking about before about, the moving around constantly, about, reporting at, various instances, in their lives, right? Again, we were talking about, I call my mom every week. This is not the type of person who is checking in on a regular basis. They are checking breaking in whenever they can, whenever they need something. And so, like, this is, like, I'm sure from their perspective, like, this happens all the time. And so I'm sure there is, like, this, rush to, it's not a big deal, right? And, like, also, too, like, in Vancouver specifically, like, again, we're going to get to this much later on, but, like, this is happening pretty regularly at this point. And so, like, at this point, they probably just say, oh, another one, so I don't know, but and so this was really the height in Vancouver of a lot of indifference towards sex workers around town and the type of activity that they brought to neighborhoods in the city, specifically Vancouver's downtown east side, which became known as the hub for sex work and drug activity all throughout Vancouver and really actually all throughout Canada. But Lori Ann had no idea just how strong that indifference was at this time, or just how not alone she truly was here. In March 1997, friends of another sex worker were realizing that their loved one's contact had faded too. Andrea Borhaven was born in Armstrong, British Columbia, but moved out of her family's home into Vancouver when she was just 16. That's when she became heavily involved in drugs and in sex work. Before that, she was a really troubled kid. She was born the youngest of 7 half-siblings to common-law parents who broke up shortly after Andrea was born. After that, she was tossed around a lot between both of her parents and was often getting into trouble and was even diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. That all continued until she was 16 when she dropped out of school and moved to Vancouver.
When was she actually reported missing?
Well, friends didn't report her missing until almost 2 years after anyone remembered seeing her. It was 1999 when someone finally called police about Andrea, and it's not really clear, like, how that came about, actually. I have to imagine, maybe a group of people were used to not seeing her for stretches of time, again, kind of what we were talking about, and just maybe no one connected the dots that no one had seen her for all that time.
That makes sense. They're probably at that point comparing notes, like, oh, I haven't seen her since X, and then you realize that
Right.
all of these people haven't seen her in that long. Yeah.
And, like, putting myself in their shoes too, like, again, it would be like, hey, like, I haven't really, like, talked to Danica in a couple months. Like, have anyone seen her? And then all of a sudden you're just like, wow, nobody's seen her in like 2 years. So, problem. It also, though, the moment that they actually, reported Andrea missing also could have had something to do with this, though, too. Right in the middle of all of this, police began to piece together a really bad situation for Vancouver's downtown east side. But before I get there, just let me tell you a little bit more about this area and paint the picture more for you all. As I said, this neighborhood of town is the heart of Vancouver's drug scene. It's the poorest neighborhood in all of British Columbia and all of Canada, according to the Crime Library. It's littered with rundown hotels, pawn shops, garbage, used condoms, and needles. The neighborhood averaged an overdose a day at the time and reported the highest rate of HIV infections in all of North America. 1 in 4 people who lived there were HIV positive. The city was really run by a group called the Hells Angels, an international outlaw motorcycle club with an estimated membership of about 6,000. Many countries consider it an organized crime syndicate, and Lori Ann, again, Cara's sister-in-law, even tells police that she knows that Cara's boyfriend was a known member of this motorcycle gang. In 1995, a survey of sex workers in the neighborhood revealed that 73% of working girls entered the sex trade as children, some as young as just 11 years old.
Oh, my heart. As a mom, as a teacher, to even imagine 11-year-olds out on the street as sex workers is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And devastating.
And, like, trigger warnings, again, to, like, all the moms out here for what I'm about to say, because, like, I didn't even want to write this, but, like, since we're talking about it, I'll go there. So there's, like, a strip on this road, that where, the sex workers hang out, called the Kitty Walk. because those are where you can pick up children. So
I can't even.
lovely place. So yeah, and the interest in this neighborhood was really piqued by an alarming trend that really started to pick up steam by the mid 1990s. It was suddenly realized that they had a lot of missing women who were known sex workers in Vancouver's downtown east side, specifically this 10 square block stretch known as the Low Track, a neighborhood nicknamed for it being framed by dark alleyways and abandoned homes. Some estimates put the number of sex workers who worked this neighborhood at the time to as many as 500 and possibly more. More than 24 women who were reported missing from the area over a 14-year period, and it went back all the way to 1983. Rebecca Guno was 23 when anyone had last seen her, and she was reported missing just 3 days later. The trends of women who seemed to vanish into the night fluctuated over the next few years, a few in rapid succession over the span of a couple of months, and then nothing for a year or two, and then a few more women all at once. But the summer of 1997 appeared to be the most active year for women who were reported missing. 3 women were reported missing in August of that year alone, and at least 2 more were reported missing for that entire summer. But because of the length of time that we're talking about, that it took friends and family to report their loved ones missing, that didn't, really tip police off until the following year when they start piecing together the full picture of what kind of horrible situation police had on their hands in Vancouver. Suddenly, they had at least 40 different people who had disappeared from Vancouver's downtown east side.
There is a part of me that's very fitted with how the police handled things, but also putting myself in their shoes, it does have to be hard to figure out, oh, okay, you haven't seen her since
Yeah.
sometime last year, or talked to her since sometime last year.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this space of some point where she's went missing, but we don't know when exactly.
Sure.
And that's happening with multiple different women. So I am sure for the police that has to be really hard, really frustrating, and trying to piece together this timeline. So I do feel for them in that, though I do think that they had started investigating instead of pushing some of these to the side, they would have noticed sooner. But I do think it's probably very difficult in what they were given.
Yeah. And so there is a piece, that, and we're going to touch on this much later on, but there's a piece where Lori Ann, much later, almost 10 years later, goes to police and, is talking to them about her sister-in-law and stuff. And she realizes that, the reason that, the investigation hadn't really kicked in for Cara, is because the missing person report that she filed was literally sitting in the bottom of a drawer, pretty much since the day that she filed it. And I'm not even exaggerating about that. That's literally where it was put. That's where it stayed for I think 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's probably a little bit of that, right? Of maybe the full department doesn't really know what the heck's going on because, all these different reports were filed with all these different investigators and all these different officers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably playing into it too, 100%, a little bit of this indifference toward this community, 1000%. But there's also too, I have to, again, going back to what we're talking about before, to give them a whole bunch of credit here, this is complicated, right? This is not, this is not, somebody who is, constantly around, different places, constantly checking in to their job, to their, after school activity, to whatever it may be. This is not this type of situation. This is very much so, people not getting reported missing for a year or plus. That complicates things, right? How do you even go, retroactively go back and put together, a timeline of when this person went missing, or, even trace down leads a year, 2 years later. They're in a really rough spot is the point.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you who I saw, if I saw someone a year ago, unless it was a really big event and I know for a fact they were there, but otherwise, a cop came and asked me, did you so, last year? Maybe. Do you know when? No. We have the aspect of social media and our phones that we can go back and we can look at what they don't have. So they are a big disadvantage.
Yeah, and like again, so again, just to re-emphasize this here, right? Because we are talking about a community that would, they would go off to whoever, to wherever for an extended period of time, and that was just normal to the people that they were known to be around for a long time. And so it was, if you go, even if you went back a year or two later and said, "Hey, when was the last time you saw Cara? When was the last time you saw Andrea?" You know what? Actually, that's a really good point. I haven't seen them for a while. That's how I'm imagining this whole situation
Yeah,
played out. If they even talk to them, right? Because I'm also imagining this community is not very trusting of the police
right.
for their own reasons.
Absolutely.
So police end up launching an official investigation into the missing woman of Vancouver in September 1998. But by the time police had any idea of what was going on, that number grew by a long shot.
Hello, Crime Over Wine listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
The investigation into the missing woman was a really difficult one, as I'm sure you all can imagine, like we've been talking about this whole episode. Women were reported missing all across the city, but the vast majority of them were known to have frequented Vancouver's downtown east side. Almost every single one of them were known sex workers who almost exclusively hung out with other known sex workers. So trying to get information on these women proved to be almost impossible. Asking these women about their friends and their pimps generated almost no leads from a community who was really distrusting of the police and really skeptical to give them any information out of fear of facing unrelated criminal charges themselves. But even with this incredibly complicated investigation, police in Vancouver were showing their hands pretty visibly as to how seriously they were taking these investigations. Even then, there were only 2 officers assigned to what was, in 1997, more than 24 confirmed or suspected missing persons cases involving sex workers in Vancouver. It was an obvious tell of just how unseriously they were taking what was in all likelihood a pattern of crimes against the city's sex workers at best and a deranged serial killer on the loose at worst.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if it occurred to them at the time that this was a serial killer, or if they were dead set that these women were just, whatever they had thought, gone on long vacations or had moved away or whatever. Because I would feel like, even if I know that they're targeting sex workers and there are still people, but you have to think, well,
right.
If it is a serial killer, will they escalate? Will they go after someone who's not a sex worker? Since that obviously wasn't a big concern to the police, but it's a crazy thought.
It is, yeah. And I mean, I have to imagine, just based on like what I know about police in terms of like, it's a political organization, just in the fact of, they report to the mayor, right? And so like, I have to imagine that like if a serial killer was if a serial killer was obvious, like they would, take this, it would change absolutely everything. Right. But like, and we're going to get to like, how much they like tampered that down in a second to like that thought, but it's, I don't know. I think that there's a very like thin line that they're walking here, right? Because you obviously, don't want to like lean too far into serial killer because like, oh my God, like there's a serial killer on loose in Vancouver, like everyone scatter. Right. But like also too, like if you come out and catch the serial killer, then you look like the good guys, so it's a very thin line like that they're towing here, right? There's a lot of different things that they have to consider. But look, I say all of that with the benefit of hindsight, right? We will never know what it was truly like living through this time in Vancouver and investigating these crimes truly in the dark. So it's easy for me to criticize 30 years later while I'm literally like sipping some wine in my closet. But I've said it on this podcast before, and I'll say it again. There is absolutely 100% this assumption or hope or desire that nothing bad ever happens here. Like nothing like that can ever happen here. Those kinds of things happen, anywhere else, not in our city. But I am here to tell you that the bad things happen everywhere. In fact, in my experience, those places where you're thinking the bad things never happen, they are probably more likely to happen there, and they are far more likely to be swept under the rug there, too.
Yeah, that makes me think of pretty much every Dateline episode ever where they're like,
right.
This was the type of town where they didn't even lock their doors. They thought nothing bad would ever happen
sleepy
here.
Town.
And I'm like,
right.
Weird that every town that thinks that is the one that seems to have this problem. Feel like maybe there's a correlation here.
I think there's like this mentality of like, nope, those things don't happen in our city.
Yeah.
Those things happen anywhere else, and we don't want to believe it, even when you lay the evidence out, as squarely as you possibly can.
I agree. I think you're spot on. I think we hear the media talk about these things for these bigger towns because they've got these bigger populations, but they're not talking about the sleepy towns because that's not as interesting to the vast majority. So it seems like Manhattan or Los Angeles or Chicago has this huge crime rate because they're talking about them all the time. But in reality, it's all over the place. That's just where they're picking to choose to talk about them.
But I also think there's something to be said too about the people, in these small towns, like the people running these small towns, the mayors, the people in city council, the police chiefs who don't want you to know that this is where the small things happen, or don't want to believe it themselves either.
Yes.
Because it makes, it puts too much of a target on your small sleepy town. If suddenly everyone thinks that that people can come into this town and do something, and are people who are capable of doing these kinds of things can come into your town and do these kinds of things. And so I think there is absolutely an interest in, portraying this. Nope. It doesn't happen here. We have a safe town. Everything's okay. Those things happen anywhere else.
Yeah. I think also with the small town mentality of like everybody knows everybody, you don't want to think that, this person that you grew up with or that your mom taught in school or that mowed your grandma's lawn or whatever, that you have been this close or you've been in contact in some way to a person who could do things like that. So I think it's some of that as well, some very heavy denial.
Yeah, and with that going along that, we're going on like a huge tangent here, but like let's just like keep going for it. But like I think like with that being said too, I think there's something about if something bad does happen in this town where everyone knows everybody, because I grew up in one of those towns, right? Like where everyone knew everybody, and so like I think that there's if something bad does happen in one of those towns, the immediate instinct is, oh, somebody who knows that person must have done it, and so therefore we're okay, right? Because I would know if Joe Smith down the road is gonna hurt somebody, is gonna hurt me, like I would know that, right? Because I know Joe Smith. But you never even imagine that this idea of like, again, like a stranger coming from outside of the town, coming into the town and doing these horrible things. And and the same thing can even be said for these like small little pocket neighborhoods, right? Like for what we're talking about here, of Vancouver's downtown east side, that's even though it's in a bigger city, it's still like a smaller community, a smaller neighborhood where everyone still kind of knows everybody, because you're still kind of intercommunicating, even though even if it's a little bit in like in a way that we're not really used to in terms of that like small town kind of complex, it's still the same idea, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that you're spot on there.
Yeah, well, there you go. Thanks for that. Need to hear that. But there was an even more alarming trend underneath all of that, too. About a third of the cases that police said that they were investigating involved missing Indigenous women. Meanwhile, in the province, Indigenous women make up about 3% of the population. And so this created some concern among the public, too, specifically among people in this community, as to why or how the women's disappearances went unnoticed. After all, the main block that these women were known to frequent at the time was literally right outside the police precinct in town. You could see it from the conference room window where they would later convene with family and friends.
Okay, so I knew about the Indigenous women having done some research. I don't think I realized at any point that it was that close to the precinct.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's really wild.
And like very intentionally too, right? Because I feel like you hear that a lot. Because like people who are involved in these kinds of lifestyles are smart, right? Like they
Right.
are, you know, in these types of situations out of desperation. They're not into these types of situations because they want to be, right? Like because they are in these types of situations out of the circumstances that they were put in their lives, and so they're smart enough to be like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to put myself in this type of situation, like I want to at the very least do it right outside the police department. I want to be at the very least do it in a lit block, right? So that way, like if something were to happen to me, people would at least notice. And so, you know, like know what kind of car I got into, that kind of thing. And so like, frankly, those are the type of, like, those are street smarts, right? Like that, like
Right.
that makes the most amount of sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. But still, it's blowing my mind that they were that close to a precinct, and it's just like,
Yeah.
wasn't registering that this was happening.
Yeah. And like literally to the point where like the missing woman inquiry, like they were having all these meetings, like you could see like it was like it was right out the window, like that's where they were getting picked up. You know, it was right there, and it was, you know, all these family and friends were coming in, like there it was, you know. So you know, all the while, though, investigators were publicly denying what was on Canada's minds and what I know is on all of your minds, too. They denied that an unknown serial killer had been roaming the streets of Vancouver freely and undetected for more than a decade. In 1999, police began to jointly meet with family members to discuss the investigation, and they take personal items of their missing loved ones for the purposes of forming a DNA sample.
You would think in doing this that it probably had to give the family some relief, right? Like, feels like they're being proactive and they're doing this, but I feel like 1999, when you already got all of these missing cases, it seems so after the fact.
I mean, I will say, so like the late 90s is when like DNA like really like comes onto the scene.
True.
Right? Like, you know, that's when like the testing, like that's when CODIS is founded, like that's when like all these like it changes the game. And so like that feels right, like, you know, for me anyways, like the timing wise, like I'm right there with you. Like I wish it happened earlier, like because the technology was around, right? It just wasn't as like widely available or like widely known. And so I do think to a certain extent, like they are like it feels pretty proactive to me to be like, okay, you know, like sure, like you've been here a bunch of times, we've kind of blown you off a bunch of times, but like now at this point, like if we are able to get anywhere, we want to make sure that we have that DNA sample handy.
Yes.
So like I give them that, I give a point to them in that category, because a whole lot of points, they lost out on a whole lot of points throughout this story, so I give it to them there.
Yeah, I didn't really think about the fact that, yes, DNA wasn't, you know, just always around. Sometimes I forget about that.
Yeah,
this
fair.
was.
Well, it's easy to today. Yeah.
Yeah, this was the late 90s, which was when DNA really took off. So I agree with you. I definitely have to give them a point there, because I had kind of glossed over that fact since it's so normal now. It's almost weird not to have DNA in a case. It's a whole different thing back then.
And isn't it crazy to you? Like I always think about this, like this was only like 30 years ago. Like this was like literally like my lifetime ago. You know, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just You know, by the time police had gotten anywhere close to an answer as to what was going on the dark streets of their city, the number of missing women they were investigating had risen to 54. But finally, the investigation to find the reason, the person, or the people behind these women's disappearances was finally heating up. But what they may or may not have known was that the person was under their noses the whole time. In the early morning of March 23rd, 1997, a couple is driving down a dark road in British Columbia, Canada, when suddenly they see something absolutely terrifying. It's a woman covered in blood, carrying a knife, running out into the middle of the road, and she starts banging on their car windows, and they are understandably absolutely terrified, but once the shock wears off, they realize that she has a set of handcuffs on one of her wrists, and she's screaming out for help. So they let her into the car and drive her to the nearest hospital, calling for an ambulance along the way. When she gets there, handcuffs still looped around her wrists, she is treated for her wounds, which are rough, and she had been stabbed at least 3 times and suffered a punctured lung and lost nearly 3 liters of blood. That's more than half in her whole body. Like, I don't even understand how this woman is even still alive.
I don't either. And like, I feel like the people who stopped and picked her up have to be super brave, because I would have kept going. I mean, I would have called 911 for sure, but I don't know that I would have picked her up in my car. Like, they're very brave.
Yeah, brave is one word for it. I don't really know if that's what I would, I have a couple different words to come to mind, but like, glad they did it, everything worked out, but like, I don't know if that's where my brain would go.
Well, I think in hindsight, I think they're brave.
Sure, yeah.
They might have been in the car and they were like, yeah, let's pick her up, and be like, you are insane.
Right.
But in hindsight, it seems very brave, because obviously they did a good thing.
Right. We know what happened.
What exactly happened to her? Like, how did she end up like this?
Well, the woman's name is Wendy Lynn Eistetter, a 30-year-old mother of 2. Her children, though, lived with their father in North Vancouver, but she lived in Vancouver's downtown east side, where she supported a severe and expensive drug addiction by robbing stores and turning to sex work. In the late night of March 22nd, she says she was picked up by a man in a red truck who was offering her $100 for her services, which was double the going rate in the area. Normally, Wendy is pretty smart. She likes to stay around the neighborhood, an area that she knows and can navigate if she gets into any trouble. But this guy is offering big bucks, right? And plus, his home isn't too far away, so she decides that she'll go with him. But when she gets to his house, which is on this farm set back in the woods, she is absolutely disgusted. It's messy, it smells, it is just gross, but the guy pays her and they end up having sex. Afterwards, though, Wendy is starting to get ready to go, and she can feel this guy just getting too close for comfort. And then in an instant, he grabs her hand and puts a handcuff around her wrist, and she starts to fight back. She's kicking, screaming, punching, and he's returning blows too. Somehow, she makes her way into the kitchen and is able to grab a knife. They both struggle a bit more, and they each end up stabbing each other, but Wendy is able to escape when the guy is doubled over in pain from stab wounds that she just inflicted on him. Once out of the house, she beelines for the nearest home and starts pounding on the door, but with no answer. That's when she notices headlights coming down the road and darts for the couple in the car, who brings her to safety.
I cannot even imagine. Like, this girl is a fighter and a survivor.
Yeah.
Because that is just an insane thing to go through. And then to have to run, I guess you have adrenaline that's helping you, because that's
you have to.
A physical trauma to go through, and then you're running down the road trying to get away.
Yeah. Well, and like, keep in mind, like 3 liters of blood, like these wounds are like nothing, like, to shake a stick at by any means, right? Yeah. And so she, like, it has to be pure adrenaline, which probably is why she lost so much blood, right? If she's running around and, her heart rate's going and stuff. So yeah, I mean, just craziness, right? And also too, like, really, like, and we talked about this previously in the episode, right? But like these, this community, right, has to have all sorts of street smarts in terms of, knowing how to defend yourself, in terms of, knowing when, when your instincts are kind of going off too. And also, again, knowing what you feel comfortable with. And, this is, obviously a time that she kind of ignored that gut instinct of, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And, this is, not typically what I end up doing. But again, like this community is a group of people, that, knows that they have to, play everything safe, like knows that they have to, that they, are still very smart about their activities, even though they're doing, a very dangerous thing. Right.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that makes sense why she had those certain guidelines. She likes to stay, near the neighborhood and things like that. Yeah.
And she's also probably hearing about her friends or, other people who, are going missing at this point, right? I mean, we know what's going on in this community. So, when nurses, though, at the hospital hear this story, something strikes them. It sounds really familiar to someone else who checked into the hospital that night for stab wounds. That's right. The man who Wendy says attacked her that night is in the hospital too. He tells nurses that he picked up a hitchhiker who attacked him and fled, but At this point, the hospital gets police involved, who are not buying this man's story. They collect both Wendy and this guy's clothes for examination, and in his pocket, they find the thing that pieces the two together. A handcuff key that they find matches the handcuffs that are still dangling from Wendy's wrist.
Oh, talk about getting caught red-handed or red handcuffed in this case, I guess. But that is crazy. And I wonder, well, it says that they weren't really buying his story, but I wonder how differently it would have gone if they had not found this one key.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and you know, because we talk about this all the time, right? Where it gets to that point where it's like we're screaming at the top of our lungs, "Oh my God, hello, hello, hello!" Like there's something wrong here, and you know, they just kind of say, you know, there's, you know, I'm sure it's fine, right? Like there's always that kind of, you know, something in the back of your head that, you know, you want to believe that this is just a normal occurrence, right? That like there's nothing nefarious going on here. So good, you know, so you know, not even just like, you know, good thing they found the key. Good thing they listened to their instinct and said, this doesn't feel like this doesn't feel right. Otherwise, who knows where we'd be today, right?
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, this guy is charged with attempted murder, but is released on $2,000 bail, never spending a single night in jail. And to add to the rough luck of this case even more, the Canadian Crown ends up dropping the charges against him after prosecutors decide that Wendy is not reliable enough of a witness because of her severe drug addiction.
This makes me want to scream.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, sure, she has a severe drug addiction. I'm not, you know, going to fight that.
Mm-hmm.
They found the key
right.
in his pocket.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't have to be that reliable. You've got, like, concrete evidence.
Right. Well, and like her drug addiction has nothing to do with this attack at all. Like we're like at all, right? Like 0%. Like if she was totally like clean, sober, like this still could have happened to her in the exact same way, right? I mean, so it just doesn't make any sense. And it's like, and also too, like feels very victim blamey on top of all that too, because like drug addicts can be victims too, like victims of assault too. So it's like, just because like she, you know, made a lot of bad choices in her life means that she can get attacked, and you're just like, sorry, like, which like, and also too, like, to be clear, like, you know, when this thing, like totally like playing devil's advocate for them too, like when this thing goes to trial or would have went to trial, like the like optics of, you know, you have this woman up here who just probably can't really keep her story straight, and probably at this point they kind of piece together that they probably are going to have that problem. Like that's jeopardizing the case. And so like I can see that. And so I can, you know, imagine a world where they're just like, well, we can't, waste all these like state or country, you know, crown resources on a case that we know we're not going to win. So which it's unfortunate, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I kind of see where they're coming from, but it just really sucks.
It does. And part of me, I don't know much about like Canadian law and their justice system. Because I feel like in America, had this happened, that they might would have just like tried to plea him down to a lesser crime, but still got
true.
it. And I don't know if that's a Canadian thing, if they would have done that, if it's just kind of like all or nothing.
Right.
And if that case, you know, if I feel like it was the same thing in America, all or nothing, there probably would be a lot of cases that were just nothing. They would have been thrown out because they didn't feel strongly enough that they could convict.
Yeah, no, you're probably right about that. That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Well, you know, that's how things stayed for a very long time there until 7 years later when things start to piece together even more. We're going back to Lori Ann Ellis. She is one of the loved ones who is pushing for police to investigate these cases as thoroughly as possible. But it's around this time that she discovers that her sister-in-law Cara's missing person report hadn't left a drawer since she had filed it back in 1998. But now things have kicked into gear, not just in Cara's case, not just in Andrea's case, but in the case of all of the missing women in Vancouver. Because they have their guy, and it just so happens to be the same man who attacked Wendy Lynn Eistetter in March of 1997. 7 years later, police decide to test the clothes and the rubber boots that this guy was wearing the night he was arrested for attacking Wendy, and they find that Wendy's DNA was on the clothes, and so were the DNA of two other women, Andrea Borhaven and Cara Ellis.
Okay, I know we've kind of previously in this episode talked a little bit like devil's advocate for the police.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, leaving it in a drawer.
Yeah.
That just like breaks my heart. Like,
yeah. Not cool at all. I mean, yeah. And like, I don't know, like this whole story, like, again, with like the whole, like at this point, we're at the, you know, in the timeline of like this whole, like the missing woman inquiry in Vancouver.
Right.
You know, they are very much so like taking a real good hard look at themselves at this point. So like, I give them credit there. But you know, it just feels like there are so many things that went through the cracks here. It's to the point of like, if you had, you know, you had these clothes in your possession back in March 1997, if you just tested it then, you know, we could have avoided 7 years of just horrible, disgusting, you know, evil things that have happened in this in Vancouver. And you know, if you just like you know, took Cara's case file, took Cara's missing persons report, and didn't stick it in a drawer, and actually did something with it, you know, or at the very least put it on your desk, because that way it wasn't in a drawer, it's stuck in a drawer somewhere. Who knows where it would be now? And so, I don't know. Again, I give them the credit, you know, to you know, very vulnerably go back and, you know, look at themselves, you know, very, you know, realistically and very thoroughly, but it just feels like it's like too little, too late, pal. Like there are all these like really bad situations that have already happened.
Yeah, and I'm sure like we get to see it all in hindsight, and sure. I have to keep that in mind sometimes that we are, but even so, that seems like such a rookie thing to do, to just stick it and leave it. A lot of the other things I can at least put myself in their shoes in that moment.
Right.
But that just seems like a very careless type of thing to do.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part for me is it's not like, oh, they were young or they're new, or that just seems careless.
Yeah. Callous a little bit. I mean, not even just careless. Like, I mean, it just feels like what, like I just don't understand. Like, if I was a cop, like, and someone came to me and said my loved one was missing, like, I can't imagine just being like, you know, just being like, oh, okay, and like taking their missing persons report and sticking it in a drawer somewhere. Like, what? Like, why are you a cop if this kind of things, you know, aren't, you know, getting you going? Like, this is, you know, like I could see like if you were a cop and like, you know, stuck on, you know, like parking ticket duty and like you just like didn't give a crap, like whatever, cool. But like, you're talking about people's lives here. And if you don't get passionate about that, like, don't do it, you know?
Right.
So
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Well, if you all haven't figured it out by now, this guy is indeed Robert William Pickton, Canada's notorious pig butcher serial killer who terrorized British Columbia for decades. And to get into everything about Robert, we could probably do a second episode. In fact, we definitely could do a second episode. And so, you know what? I think that's exactly what we're going to do. You can hear every painstaking detail about the strange life and eventual conviction of Robert William Pickton on part 2 of this episode, which will air on Murder and Mimosas this coming Saturday, September 2nd.
Yes, we are so excited. We have really enjoyed being able to look into Robert, and so we have so much information about him.
Yeah.
He's extremely fascinating to learn about, so we're ready to share that with you all, just to see what kind of person that he was growing up and then eventually became.
Yeah, no, I can't wait either. I'm so excited to see what you dug up, Danica. But in order for everyone on Crime Over Wine, who listens to Crime Over Wine, to learn, you know, more about, you know, listen to part 2 of this episode, we need to know like where they can find it. So tell everyone where they can find you, your work, and your podcast online.
Absolutely. So our podcast is on all the major platforms that you would listen to your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all of them. It's just Murder and Mimosas. And as far as our online, we are most active on our Facebook page, which is Murder Mimosas Podcast. But we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at murder.mimosas. You can find us on all of those socials.
Awesome. We'll go give them a follow. And thank you again so much for coming on. And thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. And if you are just loving this podcast and you're just wondering how you can tell everyone and anyone about it, the best way to help others discover this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening right now. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're wondering what we have in store for you next week, here's a quick sneak peek. Hello, everybody. It's Liam.
And I'm Heather Hawley. Next week, I'm joining the Crime Vineyard, where Liam and I are going to talk about a 30-year-old mystery come to light. What links will police go to find the name of the woman in the barrel?
It meets the true definition of a head scratcher, but you'll have to wait until next Wine Wednesday for the next episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.